Friday night favorite, because everyone's going to be home for dinner tonight, is going to be burgers, roasted potatoes, and a salad and whatever other vegetable I managed to get on the table. I am working currently on an article for you on iron deficiency anemia. Hi, Jamie. I'm working on an article on iron deficiency anemia, and I mostly am targeting iron deficiency in teenage girls because I have been seeing in my practice quite a few teenage girls who have iron deficiency, and I thought it was time for a little PSA on that. Sneak peek, iron deficiency is really common in teens. Iron deficiency actually, I think, is the most common nutrient deficiency in the world. And I wish I had this statistic on the top of my head right, but I think I read somewhere because iron deficiency, iron is involved in so many different things, including cognitive function, learning, growth, and development, that if we eradicated iron deficiency globally, the global IQ would go up some like 10 points or something like that. Yeah? I'm saying that because dealing with iron deficiency is really important. And while everything I say about your teens with iron deficiency, it also goes for everyone else, particularly menstruating women, right? Because menstruating women lose blood every month, and so we have to replace it. The hour, it's not hour anymore. Your needs are higher. So I'm talking about this today because I'm making some burgers. And one of the things that I often recommend to these gals is to eat burgers. And I know you're like, couldn't you think of anything healthier? And the answer is, burgers can actually be perfectly healthy. And I want to talk about the nuances of that while I'm making them. And also, what I see this the most in girls who they're the picky eaters. They're the eaters, the girls who they seem to only eat sugar and carbs. They're the ones who eat fries, toasted cheese sandwiches. Hi, Lauren. The girls who eat fries, toasted cheese sandwiches, just bread and cheese. Yeah, it's like gluten and dairy, the white diet all day long. Those teenage girls, often they're vegetarian or they're just like, ooh, with meat. And those kids, those young girls can be borderline iron deficient until they start menstruating. And as soon as they start menstruating, they're not getting very much in, but they're right on the borderline. Once they start bleeding on a regular basis, then the iron deficiency really kicks in. And it has consequences, right? It's not just they're tired, it has consequences. Add to that, I gotta get these potatoes in the oven. Add to that, some of them have really heavy periods. So you know how, because most of you are on the other end of the spectrum, when we're phasing out through menopause, our hormones are all over the place. We don't have regular periods. Sometimes we have flooding periods. They're just super heavy and wipe us out. And sometimes they're very sparse. When your girls start menstruating, it's the same way. They can have an erratic schedule. They can be flooding. It's just it hasn't settled yet. It can be years before it settles. All right, hang on. So I'm doing some roasted potatoes, which is my solution to fries. Basically, this is burgers and fries. So a lot of you have seen me do this. This is nothing new. I chopped up 3 cloves of fresh garlic and a bunch of fresh rosemary, mashed it up with some salt, infused some olive oil. So I'm going to have, garlic and olive oil. So although this is kind of a heavy dinner, burgers and fries, what I'm doing is infusing this with herbs, polyphenols, botanicals. Yeah, this rosemary, this garlic, all feeds the microbiome. And potatoes did not get us into this mess. I know a lot of people who have insulin resistance, they're finding, oh my gosh, potatoes really spike my blood sugar and keep it up there. And they might forego potatoes for a little while. But don't write them off entirely. They are a nutritious food. And again, they didn't get us into this mess. Oh, wow, that's lush. Spread that out. Hang on. I have my oven set for 375. You can really roast potatoes anywhere from 375. Oh crap, my rack is low from the last thing I made. Let the oven. 375 to 425. I'm actually going to bring this up, I think. 400. Those will probably take somewhere in the order of 45 to 60 minutes to cook. What time is it? Gosh, so we'll eat at about 6:30. So when you're doing this kind of thing, get your potatoes in first. Just get those done. So anyways, iron fish, yeah, so you have a girl who's being a little finicky, not eating very many iron sources, and then she starts bleeding, and maybe she's bleeding a lot, and they don't know what bleeding a lot looks like. They have no idea. So you really have to talk to your girls and find out how many pads you're going through, how many tampons you're going through, right? Because they're just not eating the iron sources. And I think one of the reasons we're not eating as many iron sources is we get a bit of a fear of red meat. Hang on a second. And I want to take that out. I can't tell you the number of times that I'll work with a client and I first meet them and I eat really healthy. You know, I don't eat very much red meat. I mostly eat chicken and fish. And they rattle off what sounds like a very non-nutrient dense, no iron sources. Oh, I eat spinach. Like, spinach? Not. I know lettuce is a good iron source, but spinach is not going to cut it for you. Red meat can be better for you, right? So we worry about red meat because of saturated fat and cholesterol. And I know people are like, oh yeah, I know saturated fat and cholesterol, blah, blah. But you know, it does, a lot of saturated fat, there's different kinds of saturated fat. But the saturated fat in red meat can lead to high levels of LDL. I mean, it can. Some people more than others, depending on what's going on. But, you've probably heard this before, if you get it, it's what your meat eats. It's not the type of meat you eat, it's what your meat eats that determines the fatty acid profile. So, hang on a second. We're going to talk about fatty acid profile. First of all, I'm making burgers. And the way I like burgers, I'm doing this for two reasons. Meat thrift, I'm going to stretch my meat. And I want my burgers to taste really good because I'm not buying buns. I don't do buns. I kind of make burgers and we eat burgers with chips, kind of like a steak, but a burger. So I make them like big meatballs. So I usually start with some breadcrumbs. And so what I did before this is I'll buy loaves of bread. No one wants the heel, and I don't care if they don't eat the heels because I just save the heels and then I put a bunch of the heels in a toaster and I make breadcrumbs with them. I made more than I need today, and I'm going to put all that in a Ziploc bag and keep it in my freezer. I always like to have a bag of breadcrumbs in my freezer. I don't want to buy panko breadcrumbs and more packaging. I'm just going to use what I have. This can be gluten-free breadcrumbs. When we've been on a gluten-free diet as a family before, I buy a thing of gluten-free bread. I toast the whole thing and make the whole thing into breadcrumbs because I don't like gluten-free bread that much, but I like the breadcrumbs. So in order to make this really tender and stretch it out, I start off with, what is this? I don't know. That's probably half a cup or 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs. And then I combine it with an egg and some seasoning. And this is like a tenderizer. You know what this is. You recognize this from meatloaf and meatballs. Washing my hands after handling the egg. So what I'm going to do first is kind of build my flavor and my moistening. So mix that egg up with the breadcrumbs. Keep in mind whenever you use a lot of breadcrumbs, bread has a lot of salt in it. It's just like using cheese, but a little less salty than cheese. So I'm not going to need to add tons of extra salt. Besides, the flavor cheats that I'm going to use right now are very salty. And this is, I love to have, I put a label here, Azure Market's onion soup and dip mix. So you can stir this into sour cream. It makes a great onion dip, but I tend to use it in things like this as a flavor cheat. It makes great flavor, but it's salty. I'm not going to add any extra salt. I'm going to put a tiny bit of mustard powder in there. I mean tiny, just like 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to use a pound of ground beef. I'm going to add some Worcester sauce. That's how you pronounce it. Worcester sauce. You do not say Worcestershire sauce. I know that's how you would phonetically pronounce Worcestershire sauce, but in Worcestershire, they don't pronounce it that way. Worcester sauce. Sound like a native. Okay. All right. The other thing I think I'm going to add. No. I'm out. I want oregano. I'm out of dried oregano and I just went to the store. Bollocks. I know what I'll do. I have fresh parsley. I like to put oregano, excuse me, I'm going to wash this. I'm going to put some fresh parsley in here because every week that I go to the store, I get, I'm not going to show you my island over there because it's a mess. I get a bunch of fresh parsley and a bunch of fresh cilantro, coriander, and I keep them on the counter like a bouquet in a glass of water so that I always have fresh herbs. There, fresh parsley in there. I like dried oregano because it just makes my hamburgers taste like meatballs, and I like that. It just needs a little bit more breadcrumbs to dry it out. There. It smells super good and super fresh. Again, heavy foods. I'm adding in more polyphenols, more of the herbs to lighten it up. Great. Now, I'm going to put my pounded ground beef, and you might be wondering, why do you have your ground beef in a colander, Karen? I'm so glad you asked. It's because when I thawed out my meat, the package leaked, and so it got water in my ground beef. That happens sometimes. And so I just let it drain for a little while beforehand. Yay! Okay, this requires hands. So now let's talk about fatty acid profiles in meat. It's what your meat eats. It's not what meat you eat, it's what your meat eats. So this is the story about that. If a cow eats its natural diet, which is grass, plants, not grains, right? Their fatty acid profile is going to be lower in saturated fats, higher in polyunsaturated fats, healthier fats. So it's going to be better for you. But if you feed that animal a lot of grains, then that animal's going to make more saturated fat and fewer polyunsaturated fats. So that's where we get that. So that's why, if you can, so I have friends who raise cows, get grass-fed beef, or mostly grass-fed beef. You don't have to be perfect. So in Clark County, where I live, I know people who do this, and you can always find a way and ask me, because there's communities where we match people up with cows. And you can get a quarter of a cow if you have the freezer space. Not everyone has the space or the money to do that, but that is an economical way to do it. But then what happened is people are like, oh, the fatty acid profile in beef so bad, feedlot beef. But chickens are so much better. Let's eat chicken. Well, that created demand for a cheap chicken. And so we started feedlot chickens. So I'm making them like meatballs. I'm doing 4, so everyone gets a quarter pound, about 3+ ounces of meat. And I flatten it, and I put a hole in it with my finger, and that helps it cook through. It increases the surface area to volume ratio. My mom taught me that. So now we're doing cheap chickens, feedlot chickens. What's a chicken's natural diet? Every fucking thing it can find to eat. Chickens eat everything. They eat other chickens, they eat insects, they eat snakes, they eat mice, they eat grass, they eat seeds, everything. If a chicken's given corn, it will eat nothing but corn. I've seen this. Oh, God, I love corn. They love corn and love spaghetti too. So if you feed a chicken a high grain diet with lots of corn, similar to how you feed feedlot cows, feed them fast, get them fat, get them processed. The fatty acid profile, very similar to feedlot beef. Very similar to feedlot beef. So what do you do with that? For me, I can get better quality ground beef than I can chicken for the price, largely because it's hard to protect your chickens while you're raising them economically where I live. They're going to get killed by things. Whereas beef, we have lots of decent pasture for cows in Clark County where I live. So that's kind of a good thing. Also supplemented with some salmon. I was telling you I got a bunch of salmon in a collective buy once a year that my friend Summer runs. So that's a good deal. But the great thing about beef, super high in iron, bioavailable iron. I'm going to cook it in a cast iron skillet, which I cook a lot of things in. Less bioavailable iron, right? So I try to put red meat in at least once a week in our diets. Sometimes I'll put it in little and often. For example, I'll use the same size pound of ground beef and I'll brown it and put it into a chili that has lots of beans and quinoa in it. Again, so I've stretched it out. Lots of iron, lots of high quality protein and absorbable iron, but also combined with beans that have lots of fiber, lots of other polyphenols, quinoa, lots of fiber, different kinds of protein profiles. I'll also put it in a minestrone soup with a lot of vegetables. So it's nice to mix them up. But sometimes it's great just to have some good hamburger patties with some roasted potatoes and a salad. So it ends up being really balanced. And people like it. So I encourage you not to feel all guilty like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this red meat. It's bad for my heart health. It's bad for this. Everyone's different. There are some people who really do better with less saturated fat in their diet. It's true. I'll say it right there. But even those people, if they want to, if they like it, make a good quality ground beef, they can have this sometimes, especially if it helps them maintain good iron levels. And if you have young people in your life, you have girls who are picky eaters and they're getting anemic, my goodness, do not ignore that. I'm going to have a guide that comes out in this article when I finish it. I'm spending some time to get good references and get this to be a very big and useful article for you. Got to get those girls in and get them tested. Their cognitive function, their development is suffering, and even you women out there. I know so many women. I mean, studies show that, what is it like? There's a huge number. Is it 30% of women have heavy menstrual bleeding? And some like 25% or more of those do nothing about it. Like you can actually you can help that. It's a hormone imbalance often or something else. But it leads to chronic anemia. And that's going to lead to low thyroid levels. Like you need iron to make thyroid hormone. So low iron equals low thyroid equals weight gain, brain fog, poor digestion, slow motility, constipation, SIBO, a host of other things. It's a big deal, right? Low iron is involved in everything. It's really an important mineral. So don't forget it. Don't forget about it. And don't just dismiss it like, oh, I just have heavy periods. It's just how it is. It is how it is, but let's do something about it. So anyways, I'm going to wash my hands and turn off this live. I'm going to finish roasting my potatoes. I'll wait till the last minute to cook these. I'll cook them like 4 minutes on each side in a hot cast iron skillet. And I'm going to make a salad. Oh, hang on. Let me show you what I'm going to put in my salad. So I'm going to do a green salad. I know. I always show you what I'm going to put in my salad. I don't know if you're interested. Color. I know I always talk about macronutrients. I always talk about blood sugar, and I'm still talking about blood sugar. Your microbiome makes a big difference for your blood sugar. So feed it. Feed the dang microbiome. And color is how you feed it. That is one big way of how you feed it. So I've got some arugula, some microgreens, and romaine lettuce, and I'm going to soak and make that my base of my lettuce butt. Radicchio has come in for the fall. Radicchio, these kinds of vegetables, it's bitter. It's a nice bitter green. Bitter greens are great for your digestion. Look at all that wonderful color. I will chop this up. I'll probably use like a quarter of it, a fifth or a quarter of it with each salad for our family. I've got a golden beet, which I will peel a little bit and grate that into my salad. It's sweet. It's super colorful. Grate a carrot into it. And I love radishes. I'll slice up a radish, and I have some nice white turnips that I picked up from Red Truck Farm last week. And I'll have some nice salad turnips in there and a little avocado. I mean, oh, look at all the color. So that's when you can bulk up your meal with lots of colorful raw vegetables or cooked vegetables or both. You know, some potatoes that are cooked with rosemary with all the polyphenols in that, and some good grass-fed beef that's rich in iron, that's bioavailable, that's going to help make red blood cells. And hang on, teenagers like hamburgers. They will eat ground beef, most of them. But it is a really palatable one. So I know I said I was going to finish. One of the tips I give people when they've got picky eaters in the house and like, oh, my daughter, she just won't eat meat. She doesn't eat what we have. I know there's this trend of just, she'll eat when she's hungry. I'm only going to make one thing. Fine. You know, but you can be kind of flexible on that. And one way that I find it's helpful there is I will recommend people make hamburger patties. Maybe make an extra one, make them a little smaller. And do 2 pounds at a time and stack up a bunch of prepared hamburger patties. Separate them with wax paper. Slide the stack into a Ziploc bag and freeze it. And then when you're having a meal, especially if it's a meal you know your daughter, your child, anybody really, but let's say your daughter who's anemic and not eating anything, and they're not going to eat what you're serving, pull it out, thaw it out, and fry it. They can fry it themselves. And they've got a high quality protein that's high in iron, and it's easy. That's the kind of meal prep you can do for them. Heck, you can do it for yourself. Heck, you can do it for your whole family if you want to. But you just got a stack of hamburger patties. I think you can buy that stuff at butcher shops where they pre-make hamburger patties for you, but I like my hamburger patties, so you can do what you like. All right, so that's my meal. Now I'm super hungry and I'm gonna get these going. Let me know if you have any questions about iron deficiency. I will comment on that here, answer your questions, or I will make sure I add it to this article that I'm writing that I have ready for you next week, because this is a really important topic. We got to help our girls. We got to help each other, build our iron up. All right, so you guys have a good weekend, and thanks for watching. Bye.